Hello and welcome again, and this is the next episode of Bicara Minggu Ini's Quick Takes. Today, we have one of the leading people here on Challenger. We have Gina, Vaneisha, and Alicia. Thank you for joining us on Bicara Minggu Ini. So, how has it been over the week? We've seen a lot of drama going on. So let's start a bit of recap on this in this episode of Quick Takes. How has it been? Let's look at Parliament on the first day. How do you feel when you look at the Parliament? That change of the parliamentary speaker. Unfortunately, Tan Sri Muhammad Arif had to leave his job. He's a nice man, but now we have a new speaker. What's your take on it, Jean?
Okay, so hi, I'm Gina. I'm from Challenger, and I'd also like to add to that whole scenario. Yeah, he's a nice man, but at the same time, I think what's more important about this issue is that he was democratically elected, and he was undemocratically removed. So, how I feel as a Malaysian, it's been this sort of plateau since February of just pure disappointment. My emotions went up a little bit from Parliament Digital because there was a lot of, I think, potential there. And then I think why everyone tuned into Dewan Rakyat is just so they can see, how are they compared to the kids, right?
I try not to
call them kids.
Yeah, I remember I had this conversation with Arina, and then we were like telling each other, because Arina and I, we were literally saying we had so much fun watching Parliament Digital, looking at how they conduct themselves so well compared to the Parliament sitting. It's live on TV, and they're acting like kids. I mean, worse than 5-year-olds. Even 5-year-olds has more discipline. And years we've seen even parliamentarians saying so many unparliamentary words, like it was so uncouth, and they do it over and over again. Now, the reason why we don't call them kids, because this is what a lot of the boomers, the politicians, they do to dump down a lot on young parliamentarians. From there, how is the conversation between the young parliamentarians with the members of the parliament in this week of the session?
I didn't understand the question.
So the question is, we've seen some of them actually talk to them. How was the response from them?
Maybe you can.
Alicia.
It's been good. From what I understand, the Parliament Digital representatives are still meeting up with members of Parliament. They're still getting plenty of engagement. So they're talking to both sides of the political divide. They're shaping their opinions, and they're basically trying to figure out what's next for them. And it's been a very interesting experience to watch and see their takeaways from all these little meetings. So maybe 20 of them meet one MP, and then I think they had 50 of them meet Tunem on a comm call just a few days back.
Oh, maybe you can share a bit more what has been discussed in the comm call. How was it arranged? Was it a call where it's a Chatham House rule, but generally you can share with us how did the call went with Tunem?
We were having other meetings.
Yeah, we were here. So we actually met some of the Parliament Digital people after the call here, and they noted a few things that Tun is very good at not actually answering a question while answering the question.
What we call as the usual politician Tai Chi.
I mean that, and also I think he speaks in parables quite well. He's very adept. So maksud tersirat lah, like that. He's good at that. So
he's always good at kiasan. Means it becomes very ambiguous. You don't know whether he's saying A or B. And it's up to you to interpret.
That comes with experience.
And that's why media sometimes love him. Reason why is that he loves to drop headlines, so it's easier for a lot of press to write. But these are some of the things where young people like us, we learn, and how this older generation, and they're so seasoned in managing media. But we look back at what happened in the parliament. From Parliament Digital, we were so happy and high-spirited at how things are going on, and we have them talking to parliamentarians, and right on the first day, it got smacked in the face. Look at what happened to Muar MP, Syed Saddiq, getting heckled, getting called cucu nak cakap. and they still heckle a 95-year-old MP. So how do you feel with that, from Challenger's point of view?
I think it's very alienating to both those groups, both young people and our senior citizens. But at the same time, it does show that they just don't take their job seriously enough. They seem to think that Parliament belongs to the middle-aged man. I also want to bring up, YB Kasturi, who is also called very vile things. And this is not a single instance. I think what's different this time is that we're all paying attention, and that's important, especially like following the Black Lives Matter movement. Like we're I feel a bit more educated about noticing these things now and calling it out. And I'm glad to see the outrage the public has shown. But at the same time, it shows that we've got a lot more work to do in educating and making it a norm to call these things out.
Out from that we've seen that sort of outrage. I would not say outrage. It has garnered a lot of attention from young people.
Yeah.
That's why we have the Our Time and Masa Kita hashtag coming out. How does it come out? What actually went through the thought process of having that Masa Kita and Our Time? Now let's delve deeper and how. I mean, this has been a long time. That sort of we're saying the same old thing again.
It's been a long time coming.
It's been a long time, and these same people getting off the hook all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I can share with us about it.
Maybe you want to take some?
I think Masa Kita really sums it up because it talks about how, there is a time where it was the norm, and we cannot let that norm continue in the political sphere because it's divisive, it leaves people behind, it doesn't take into account different voices, different perspectives, and it repeats a pattern. It's a pattern that they keep going through over and over again from whichever side of the divide they're on, and it's time to change that. And the only way to do that would be for the youth to stand up and be counted and say, I'm tired of complaining about these things, I'm ready to step in.
It's our time.
It's our time.
Yes, exactly. When I interviewed Syed Sadiq in one of the earlier podcasts, is that why don't young people? It has been a normal thing back then in the 50s and 60s. Can you imagine those in those days? And they are still alive today. Mm-hmm. How old were they? They were called as they were taken up the task as Gina, you are the Secretary General Challenger, right? So look at Lim Kit Siang. He was a Secretary General at 26 for DAP.
Oh, by the way, I was 22 when this happened.
See, you're much younger. So at that time, those who are aged 35 and below, 50 years ago, these things are considered norm, but not now. What went wrong?
Those people didn't leave.
Yeah, I think that's most like it just stayed. The only reason I'm secretary now is because we started a new NGO with new people. We had to demand that space, and I think that's what's different now. We're all just demanding our space and demanding and saying it's our time. We're tired of these old faces just
don't
being
get
around.
us wrong. We definitely acknowledge the service and the work that people
we essentially
have
stand
put
on their
in.
shoulders.
Yeah, but there has to be space for new people, new blood, new ideas to come in.
When you're supposed to retire, you retire, right? Okay, this is not attending to anyone. But in future, because at the end of the day, the median age for Malaysian is 28.2, if I'm not wrong. That was 2 years ago. By 2020, it's going to be 30. But you can look at numbers in Parliament or even...
55.
Yes, its median age in the Parliament is 55. And we're going to have 7.8 million new voters. And we have zero political education in school. Although Education Ministry is saying that they're going to have the element of politics in universities, but it's not enough. So for you demanding that space, how will you work out as Challenger, as an organization like this, in demanding this space, and how are you going to work on this timeline?
Interesting.
I know this is going to be a really tough one to
I think what is important is starting this movement with the intention of leaving eventually. That is something that we must do differently from the generation that came before us. So mentorship and making sure that we involve new blood all the time, making sure that we don't hog the space and be very conscious about how much, like we're doing now and also when we're going to leave. So really planning out that timeline is important. And I think it is also time for, especially like the 15 to 18-year-olds, right? I mean, 16-year-olds, especially now, in like next year, they're going to be preparing to like do their SPM. They need to really think about their future as citizens beyond just, the futures as young adults. I know I can say we can push the government to implement but at the end of the day, it really starts with the culture from home, how they're brought up, like how they carry themselves among their friends, how they carry themselves in their schools even. And I think what's nice about Parliament Digital, for example, is that we've seen such leadership from very young people. And it's also telling about like young people are not uninformed. They are there. They just need a space. So us as Challenger, what we can do is create that space and curate it in a way that we know that they're coming up and then letting it become theirs at some point.
And do you feel that this is going to be a doable process in the next 5 years? Is it doable? Some have a different thought that this thing is not going to change. It's going to take at least 2 generations. But as young people, we are passionate and we can't wait for things to change just to make it happen.
But it's been many generations.
Yeah.
And this is ours, so...
Yeah, and hence, it's our time.
Yeah.
But, there's always that sort of perception saying that, the education and politics in West Malaysia, there's a huge difference between West Malaysia and East Malaysia. However, that sort of perception has changed in Parliament Digital. And we have a very young speaker from Bintulu, she's just 15. Moving forward from there, how will Challenger play its role in political education in East Malaysia?
No.
Now, this is a heavy one because, to be honest, on the ground, in terms of political education to the youth, it's not as, what I would say, it is not as strong as what we have seen here in West Malaysia. It's very active, very proactive kind of thing. But we have seen not many things going on in East Malaysia. What do you think about that?
I would argue that it's less a West Malaysia, East Malaysia divide and more a rural-urban divide.
Yeah.
I think the digital divide has a lot to play in this. If you don't have access to information, how do you stay aware and informed?
Correct. I remember, let me quote another number again. It is about 36% of Malaysian students have no access, no device at all during MCO. So the digital divide, it's very real. 36% of that is about more than 350,000 students with no device and no access to education. They can access to online classes. So with this digital divide, but we know that the expansion and all that is going on, and devices are getting cheaper. You can get smartphones at a cost of less than 300. But again, the socioeconomic ability of rural and urban divide, it's real as well. So how do you bridge in with facing this challenge on digital divide?
So I think that as an NGO, Challenger just has to keep raising these kind of issues and making the people who do have access aware of the divide. Obviously, these are things that need to be addressed structurally and widespread across the whole nation. So these are things that we just have to champion in terms of policy, in terms of implementation, and really push and advocate for that.
What say you, Jean?
Yeah, I was thinking, right? Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, what she did was she sent laptops and routers to rural students. And I think what we can also do is lobby for our government to adopt similar policies. And at the same time, just bypass them and try to, get companies to sponsor. Maybe in terms of data collection, we can help. Maybe in terms of engagement, we can help. But at the end of the day, these are structural things that need government intervention and better infrastructure as well. Like, you can't send these things out if the roads are not fixed. You can't send these things out if there's no internet to connect them to, right?
Yeah, you can't send this out because they still need clean water and
At the
electricity.
end of the day, the
These are
basic needs
basic
must be
necessities.
met before anything can be. Everything, again, it's Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like you need to fulfill some of these before you can even reach just having an education. And education by right is a right. So we're not doing very well in East Malaysia.
Correct. Point taken on that. This is a very, very good thing. Then again, it's also in rebuttal to those who think like you gotta make sure they can feed themselves because before we go into issues on reforms. There are some of those who are saying that reform agenda is not important, but let's solve that first. So what do you think about those people who say that?
Again, it really comes with educating why it's important. I think few people see the connection between policy and their real life problems of not having enough food on the table, not having a salary that can support a family, and that's where education from NGOs can come in. That's where just having conversations in mamas can really spark this interest. Again, political literacy education is very important, just to bridge that disconnect. I don't know, what do you want to add?
Policy is one thing, but the reform agenda addresses the systems that create policy. So the system that is supposed to look after your well-being and translate to policy, which people can feel, is not working, then the policy isn't going to work because the words and stuff might be passed in the Dewan Rakyat, might be gazetted, but if it doesn't trickle down to the people, what is the point?
And at the same time, right, I think there's a disenchantment with the system as it is. Like people are so turned off by this conversation that we have to work harder at educating them.
And saying young Malaysians are lazy.
No, I wouldn't say young Malaysians are lazy. I just think they are.
That sort of, I mean, that was that came out from boomers,
yeah,
right?
It's a common
It's a common perception towards young Malaysians that young Malaysians are not. They're not interested to do hard jobs, menial jobs, or change their mindsets, or taking up difficult part. And actually, in the actual fact, they are not. They are really hardworking. Just that sometimes they are not given that chance like everyone else.
Yeah,
Precisely.
job opportunities are not proportionate to your level of education at this point.
Now, moving on to jobs, right? We are going to expect about 7% of unemployment in the country. Do you think with the Bencana and Prihatin, the stimulus package, do you think it's enough? Because we are going to project to about 1.2 million people out of jobs. And what's scary is that we have about 51,000 new graduates every year. Those are undergraduate. 5,000 postgraduate students are going to graduate every year to find themselves without any job. And this situation will only take about 18 to 24 months to recover. So do you think the government is doing enough to address this?
But, I mean, they're already calling this October Bloody October. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about what is Bloody October?
Bloody October is when people start losing their homes, or the companies simply cannot afford to continue, so they foreclose. It's mass financial and economic failure. On a personal scale, on a company scale. I don't know if you've seen this report. I think I read it on the Edge. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, because this is what happens when people lose their jobs, right? They can't afford to take care of their homes. And moving forward as well, like, we have to think 15 years from now, we were already going to prepare for AI to come in. And it's bleak. I don't have a good answer for how to deal with this because everyone's going to be struggling. Other than, looking for ways to see opportunity in all this. Like, you could move into entrepreneurship, for example. Like, you have to move into agriculture. Food shortage might be a real thing. Like, you really have to look for spaces in which our skills, accept that it might not matter, and also come into a new world, because we are in a new world, and it's a world that doesn't need what we already know. So
it's not a very nice new normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also kind of like a world trend. It's going to be a world recession after all.
Yep.
And another part of trend that we are also looking, because we are going back to another part of politics, is that the growing conservatism, far right, and that sort of clash between the two. And people are dividing and looking at each other based on people of color, skin, creed, religion. There's also a growing part of racial, religious kind of connotation to the mainstream political discussions. And as young people like you guys in Challenger, how do you look at this kind of trend, particularly in Malaysia? It's as if saying sexist thing to women, it's normal. It's as if saying that you're dark is normal. So how do you look at this? And probably start with Alicia. What do you think? That the growing disparity, this sort of divide of using race and religion into political mainstream.
I think historically it's always been done. I think again they're just repeating patterns because that's the easiest way. Yeah, it's the easiest way. You just use the race and religion cards to incite people. You get them emotional about it, even if it is based on like half truths, and you get an emotional response, which to you is validation. So it's something that politicians in Malaysia have relied on since independence, I would even argue. And it's something we need to step away from if we're going to go forward and be a united and true Malaysia.
So what about you, Gina?
Yeah, so I would argue that we have a responsibility to be better. Like, we are aware now, and we just don't give in to this divide. I think as Malaysians, especially right now, what will hold us all together is this crisis that we're all going through together. And at the same time, because it's so clearly Malaysian, it's so clearly global, in fact, that it'll get to a point where race won't matter. And this is an idealist in me, lah. I want to believe that we share our pain, and we need to talk about not having enough food on the table. We need to talk about, our children not being employed. We need to talk about our kids not getting an education, or if education is even necessary. It's a new age, lah, and I feel that this whole racial thing will just die if we stay committed to the fact that more things keep us together than divide us.
Looking forward, election's gonna come at any time.
Yeah.
It might be early, it might be later. So how would Challenger play your part in putting more young people into parliament? What's your goal? How many young people do you want to push to be in the parliament?
Enough to swing. I think that number is now 3.
Only 3?
I mean, yeah, you saw the vote, right? It was a difference of 2 in favor of the government currently. Technically, you only need 3 young people to really swing.
Only 3 young people, those who are age 40 and below, in the parliament.
30, I would argue. But 35 lah.
Now, 35 people in the parliament. 35 young parliamentarians.
I mean, the number is not as important as the intention, I feel. Yeah. At the same time, what we can do is really push for that third force, where
Youth participation.
The third force as well. We talk about third force because right now it's like a 2-party system. One is Pakatan Harapan, the other one is Perikatan Nasional. And we know that Pakatan Harapan and Perikatan Nasional is pretty much the old fogies again. I know old fogies may sound bad, but then again, it becomes a very hierarchical. You go through a certain level again, then there are those who go in power who are still up there, they don't want to leave the post. Will they be a party for the young people?
This is interesting. And a lot of us are divided on this. So I stand that this new party that is hint might. Okay, all right. But the thinking behind if this party starts is it should be a Malaysian party. It should be a Malaysian party. Like just now we mentioned there are 2 different types of minorities in parliament right now. There's a senior citizen, and then there's also your young folk. But if you were to put an age cap on this party, what would happen is we would essentially be playing into another type of exclusivity. And I don't think that would appeal to the general rakyat, because the general rakyat at the end of the day is also half above the age of 35, 40. So I would argue that it can be youth-led, and you don't need a youth wing. This is another thing I've been very against. You don't need a youth wing.
You don't need a women's wing either.
No, you need a women's wing. You need a women's wing. For example, with the child marriage issues, like these are things that are specifically women. Domestic violence. Okay, not specifically women, but again,
But I'm going to pose you a question. Is that
Yep.
do you think, both Gina and Alicia, do you think like having a youth leader or
Definitely.
a women leader in a political party, do you think like this serves like a token?
No. So this is why whatever new party that comes up must already have this, and it must be an obvious thing. Like if you have to say you're young, and if you have to say that you're a woman, it's not obvious enough, right? Like I feel people like. Okay, can I say names? Like the YB of Ampang, for example. Like
Go ahead.
Yeah, like she has weaponized this whole women's and it for good reason, like I believe that you need to set quotas. I believe that you need to open up spaces, but at the same time, it's been an ongoing theme, and we need to enter an age in which it's a no-brainer. Like being led by a woman, sure. Being in that room, sure. Having a voice, sure. What you are at this point needs to be there. Like we need to be inclusive about how we think as well. Like we can't just have tokens there. We need to have people who are there because they are of merit, and at the same time, just have that like just don't be close to a woman leader lah. Like
Let's put it
So
this
what about
way.
you, Alicia? Yeah.
Let's put it this way. Every Malaysian should look at the 222 members of the Dewan Rakyat and see themselves represented in some way, shape, or form. That's the goal. We should be represented.
Dewan Rakyat, not Dewan politician, like
Or Dewan Party.
or Dewan Party or Dewan Bloc, whatever.
So do you think that this is gonna be having a new party? Because I think some of you have read Dr. Wong Jin-Wat's piece. A lot of the youth will be very much centered in the urban area, but not in the rural area, and there will be a serious and I won't say misrepresentation, but this part on they'll be mostly but not in the rural area. But most of the seats are actually in the rural area. What do you think, Alicia?
I think this is a serious job for the EC to really look at the guidelines and standards at which they delineate. I think that really we need to be proportional and representational.
Part of the reform agenda.
Yeah, and that's why it's important.
And looking forward, what's next for Challenger? What's coming up for Challenger? If I'll come to where like people would like to join Challenger, we'll ask Gina and Alicia tell you how you can help and support Challenger. So what's upcoming for Challenger?
Well, for starters, we have these 222 really young, really eager Parliament digital reps that we intend on, making sure that their voices are still heard and they progress and take up that space in the nation building that's happening.
Well, I mean, what's next is really just all the same stuff that we used to do, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna open call to join, and put energies together and work towards building this third force with the support of the 222 and possibly us. I think it's the other way around. I think it's us supporting them, just platforming them forward.
Where you put enough young people, enough good hearts, good brains, good just passionate people together, and we can do almost anything.
Yeah.
So we are going to expect a lot more political education, and as well as, there's a possibility. Do you have any plans from Challenger? Because a lot of youth are kind of disenfranchised from joining any political parties. Any plans to actually help to, for example, campaign for a lot more young people and helping them, for example, getting the campaign started and even run for the upcoming parliamentary, get a seat in the parliament?
Yes, there are plans, but wait for us.
Hooray. So, how would one join Challenger? Gina, Alicia,
You
go
can
away.
drop us a message on Facebook or Twitter.
Or hit
Instagram.
one of us up on Instagram, where I think we're all personally quite I know I am y'all need to Insta story more. Like just hit us up, DM us, just say, hey, I'm a young person, I want to commit 2 hours of a week, just volunteering.
Or even
Come
if
on
you
in.
just have questions that you would like to pose and get like answers about like what we do, what we stand for.
DM the
That works
page,
too.
tweet us, where like you can, I think, also hit
We
up
can be
Numan
very
or
millennial
Aaron
about
or-
this.
Yeah, like we're reachable. I think that's what we're trying to say.
Very approachable, we hope.
All right. And that's it. And I would like to thank Jean and Alicia for joining me on Bicara Minggu Ini's Quick Take. And
having us.
you can follow them on Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. If you have any questions, you can throw it away and ask Jean and Alicia.
Don't throw it away, throw it at us.
Yeah, just throw it. Don't throw it away. But if you like to join politics or whatnot, if you have any questions, maybe you can ask Challenger to help you out.
You
Yeah,
can
we will
even
guide you the way,
join.
maybe. No, yeah, maybe. And here, and this is the episode on Bicara Minggu Ini's Quick Takes. You're listening to BMI Bicara Minggu Ini, uncovering current affairs and politics. And you can listen to the stories and interviews on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, and also on Apple. You can find me on iTunes for more updates and stories. If you have any suggestions, you can tweet to me at I'm Nomgo. Thank you for listening, and see you next week.